Hi everyone! So I am starting today reading Horrorstör by Grady Hendrix, and we are on chapter 15. It's called Littabod, and you can see the Littabod right here. That looks a little scary. It says, using the power of centrifugal force to cause blackouts and unconsciousness, Littabod is a ceaseless rotational machine that harnesses the primal forces of nature and turns them against your body. If you're lucky, you'll simply experience vomiting and permanent brain damage. Yikes. All right, so the story begins. Amy's first instinct was to switch off her light, tuck her head under her arms like a little girl, and make them go away, as if they were merely Ruth Ann's creepy crawlies. If she didn't see them, they wouldn't see her, but she knew it was too late for that. She couldn't hide anymore. They were real, so she forced herself to look. She saw a gallery of rotten and humiliated flesh. Arms hung at obscene angles, legs were twisted and shattered at the knee, spines gnarled and bent, their rags and flesh hanging in tatters, caked with reeking mud. She couldn't take her eyes off them. Work burns the sickness from a man's mind, Wardenworth proclaimed. It is the philosopher's stone that transmutes the base metal of deviancy into the pure gold of obedience. It was the same kind of hellfire and brimstone sermon as before, only this time Amy noticed something wrong with Josiah's voice. It sounded far away, as if she and Basil were listening over a bad phone connection. Even worse, the sounds of his speech were out of sync with the movement of his lips. He looked like a character in a badly dubbed movie. I think we can run for it, Amy whispered to Basil, over on the left. He didn't answer. She turned and saw that his skin was greasy with cold sweat, and he was muttering under his breath. My children, said the warden, smiling at them. The coward and the fool. What a disappointment that the two of you have not yet grasped my lesson. But I am a tireless instructor, and now you shall join your fellows in my mill, where we will grind your minds into a shape more pleasing. Your mill is closed, Amy said. It doesn't exist anymore. Poor sick wretch, Josiah said. I want to make you well. My penitents came to me riddled with corruption, and I worked their mortal bodies to effect a cure. Some were harmed in the refinement of their minds, some were forced into painful new shapes, but mustn't the sculptor crack the stone to pull from within it a more pleasing form? Must the surgeon cease his cutting at the first cries of pain? We're leaving, Amy said. We're taking our friends and getting out of here. I would be violating my oath if I let you go while you are still so sick, the warden continued. My patrons could apprehend neither my methods nor my mission, and so they tried to snatch my penitents away before they were cured. I could not let that happen then, and I will not let it happen now. Amy looked at the water on the floor, and the realization dawned. What did you do? She asked. It would be better to ask how I saved them. I made the ultimate sacrifice. My warders took them to the basement workrooms, and we locked the doors. The ones who would not cooperate were gently shut up inside coffins so they would not disturb the others. Then I opened the sluice gates and let the river sing them to sleep, as a mother takes a sick babe into her arms. You drowned them, Amy said. I hid them in the curtains of time, all 318 of them. I pulled the river over their heads like a veil, and then I opened my own throat and waited until I could bring them back and cure them. I understand it caused much inconvenience to my sponsors. I understand they could not find the bodies and had to pack coffins with river mud and bury them to quiet the mewling families. But I have outlasted them all. These sick men, sick with laziness, sick with misunderstanding, sick with lunacy, sick with deviancy, they shall be cured. I will not cease my labors until they are made whole, even if I must begin my work afresh every night until the end of time. Is that not a commitment worthy of celebration? Is not my mind magnificent? As he shrieked and crowed, Amy looked at the man-shapes surrounding them. Their faces were obscured, draped with filth and darkness, but she didn't feel that they were evil. Instead, she felt a profound sorrow for them. These prisoners had served their sentences long ago. Those poor lost souls, never paroled, never resting, doomed to repeat the same pointless tasks over and over. They hadn't put her in the chair because they hated her. They had put her in the chair because they didn't know what else to do. Their guilt had kept them enslaved to this place long after their sentences had been served. I regret you could not be cured in one night, Wardenworth said, looking at Amy. But your disease has reached an advanced stage. It will be a difficult procedure. I don't have a disease, Amy said. Oh, but you do. And now you shall join your friends. It is good to have new patients, for there are so many cures I have yet to try. Dr. Cotton's theory of organ removal, the rotational machine, hydrotherapy baths, total immersion. Listen to me, Amy shouted, raising her voice and projecting across the showroom. You don't have to be here anymore. The shapes gave no indication of having heard her. Amy, Basil hissed, what the hell are you doing? But ultimately we shall rely on toil, the warden was saying. Amy didn't know whether it was her imagination or whether his voice was getting louder, as if he was trying to drown her out. It will be the backbone of your cure, for toil is the great grinding stone to make keen the blade of your spirit. Toil is the ladder by which your putrid flesh ascends into health. You have served your time, Amy continued. Any sentence you had is long over. What did you do? Kill people who would be dead now anyway? Steal food for your families who are already in the ground? Owe money to a company that has been out of business for 100 years? You've paid for your crimes. Beware the words of liars who lure you into weakness, Wardenworth shouted. You know the weight of your own sin, which shall never be relieved. Expiation unto eternity. That is the only path to wellness, the only true command. No one's keeping you here, Amy said. You're not chained, you're not sick, you don't need a cure. You can walk away at any time. That's all you have to do. Walk away, you can be free. A muddy restlessness passed through the penitents. I don't think this is a good idea, Basil whispered. Free, Amy said, doubling down. This isn't a prison anymore. It collapsed decades ago. Its walls are gone. No one remembers your crimes. Freedom through work, Wardenworth screamed, hysterical. That is the only freedom, for work is the whip that mortifies your failed flesh and shapes your sins into something more pleasing, something more... You aren't in chains anymore, Amy shouted over him. Your sentences are just habits. You've been free for decades. You just never realized it. She's a liar, Josiah shrieked. She's filling you with honeyed words and false hope. Tonight has but one conclusion. There are no other paths to travel. There is only one end. There was silence for a moment, a second when Amy felt that anything could happen. Then Wardenworth stumbled forward, shoved from behind. Splashing across the wet floor, he whirled around. Who dares touch me? He shouted. I am your keeper. The crowd of shadows were shuffling forward now. They surrounded him with their muddy bodies and then seized him and began to pull him and push him, shoving him from one side of their tight circle to the other. They were hungry like a pack of wild animals. Something had been unleashed. The penitents swarmed around him, thick and heavy with rot and grime, blocking him from sight. Josiah squealed through his torn throat. As his screams turned to liquid burbling, Amy was glad she couldn't see the rest. She and Basil turned to leave, but a cluster of penitents stood in the way as still as stones. Why aren't they moving? Basil whispered. I don't know, Amy whispered back. Head left. They edged to the left, toward the bright and shining path, but more penitents blocked their passage. It didn't make sense, Amy thought. She had set them free. She had commuted their sentences. What do they want? Basil asked. Before she could answer, the penitents were on them, crashing over them like a tide, sending Basil and Amy turning and tossing, submerged in their filthy stench, completely at the mercy of the forces that bore them away. Amy's screams were cut off as she drowned in their attack. The penitents didn't want anything. They were simply bound to the same cycle that had governed their spirits for more than a century. This was who they were. This was what they did. Basil tried to reach her, but was caught up in the mass and swept away. The beam of his flashlight jogged and flashed across the ceiling as he was buried beneath the onslaught. It was the chair again. They were taking her to the chair. Amy struggled, but their hands were iron bands, caked with ice and freezing mud, lifting her from the floor, raising her, kicking and thrashing over their heads. She saw the ceiling spiraling above as she was borne across the floor, catching glimpses in the fragmented light from the flashlight. She could feel herself suddenly dropped, lowered toward a dimly glimpsed wardrobe lying open on the floor like a coffin. I'm not going to fit, Amy's mind gibbered to itself as she was pressed into the tight opening. I'm not going to fit. I'm not going to fit. The penitents closed the door over her. Bracing her arms, Amy tried to get leverage and push against the lowering wood, but she was fighting gravity. There were too many of them. They were too heavy, and they were pushing down too hard. She managed to stiff-arm the door, holding it up as if bench-pressing it, but she started to feel her elbows bending in the wrong direction, ready to snap. The penitent showed no sign of relenting, so she relaxed her arms, and the lid slammed down, a concussive blast of air striking her across the face. Amy heard something slamming into the surface over and over. Blam, 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 blam. In the tight space, each blow was like a gunshot at point-blank range. It was the sound of nails being driven into her coffin, sealing it shut. Hammering filled the showroom floor, and the beehive was alive with the sound of toil once more. Oh, crap! Well, that's not good. Yeah, so join me next time for chapter 16, and we will figure out how they're going to get out of this. Bye!